combined San Francisco Ashby Village climate Friday morning climate talk. This is the fourth one. There will be one more, and this has been really an eye-opening, stimulating event. So we have our speaker here, Jacob Klein, who is the so this is a very long title, and you can correct me if I get it wrong. He is the regional coal organizer for the San Francisco Bay chapter, Redwood region, and Mother Lode for the Sierra Club. That's a big territory. You can tell us about that. Okay, and so the way this is going to work is he's going to make a presentation and there'll be question time. And Joanne Carter from Ashby Village is going to be the reporter. So she will be summarizing for the May 14th meeting what the key points were of Jacob's presentation, what kinds of questions were asked, and each of the 5 groups, Friday morning groups, will be doing that. So everybody will get a sense. And there have been some people in each of the talks that weren't at all of them. So, and then of course some of us forget from one point to the other, so it'll be a good refresher also. So that's it. That's what we're going to do. And before we start, I think we're going to go around and just say your name and which village you're from, and yeah, that's it. So Craig, we'll start with you.
Yeah, Craig, I'm the volunteer for Ashby Village, is providing technical support for this particular meeting.
Bruce?
I'm Bruce Johnson from San Francisco Village.
Roberta?
I'm Roberta Pressman from Ashby Village and a member of the Elder Action Committee or interest group.
Jacob?
Hi, I'm Jacob Klein. I'm with Sierra Club. I'm in Oakland on Ohlone land.
Betty?
I'm Betty Webster from Ashby Village, member and volunteer.
Bill?
I'm Bill Haskell from San Francisco Village and one of the organizers.
Okay.
And Tristan? I think you're there. I see your name. Okay, Toby.
I'm Toby Klein and I belong to Ashby Village.
Margaret. Oh, you're muted. You're muted. Unmute.
I'm muted because there's construction.
Okay.
Margaret Mishner from San Francisco Village.
Linda.
Linda Greenberg from San Francisco Village.
And you know, when we go back to normal, we will be saying to people, "You're muted," even though we won't be virtual anymore. Kristen, we are. Do you want to introduce yourself? I think you're there, and you might be from San Francisco Village, correct? No. Okay. Well. Okay. A mystery person. All right. So I think we're ready to start. Let me just look at my little crib sheet and make sure I didn't leave anything out. Oh, yes, I do want to say one thing here. Just to remind you that, you know, we had the kickoff meeting in March, and we did hear a little bit from each of the 5 organizations. And then people felt like they wanted to get sort of up close and more personal with each organization so they could make a decision about how to wrap their arms around the organizations and which one they really wanted to get involved with. So that's what we've been doing with these 5 talks. And then we will come back on March 14th and talk a little bit about what we did as a result of the talks and maybe what barriers we were running into that were preventing us from taking action. And Bill, do you want to add something? Yes.
May 14th.
Oh, I did it again. May 14th. Yes. And I will say it at the end. Okay. All I can say is that my husband, whose birthday is May 16th, is going to have a lot of people at his party as a result of my mixing up the dates consistently. Okay, Jacob, you're going to tell us now how we can get involved. Have at it.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie and Bill and Craig and Joanne, for helping me to be here. I'm really excited to be here with all of you. Julie, you beat me to the punch. I was going to do a round of intros, but you already took care of that. So thank you for making that happen. Just going to do a brief introduction of myself. Jacob Klein, regional coal organizer for the Mother Lode chapter, Redwood chapter, and San Francisco Bay chapter of Sierra Club. I've been in Oakland for almost 7 years. Grew up in Southern California. I've been in this position for a little over a year. I had 1 month at the office before the lockdowns hit. So, it's been an interesting time to try and organize on environmental issues and just generally. Before that, a lot of my work was focused on inclusion and equity work within Jewish spaces. So I worked at an organization that did LGBTQ inclusion in Jewish communities. I was very involved in my synagogue at creating space for social justice ritual and did anti-racist organizing in Jewish communities. So that's a little bit of my background and some of the sort of ethos I bring in. So yeah, I'll dive in. If you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat or interrupt, although I think we also do have dedicated time afterwards, so we could always get into that. Then I know I can speak a little fast, so I will try to slow down, but if I'm speaking too fast, please let me know and I will regulate that. You're probably, I would imagine that many of you are already familiar with Sierra Club to some degree. It's one of the oldest and largest grassroots environmental organizations, originally founded by John Muir. And we're definitely known for our outdoor activities, hikes and camping trips and things like that. But we also do a great deal of political advocacy on a whole range of environmental issues and at a lot of different levels. You might be very familiar or more familiar with the National Sierra Club, which is headquartered in Oakland and works on the national stage. But there's also chapters that focus really tightly on local and regional issues. Most of the time, a chapter is state specific. So there's like the Alabama chapter or the North Star chapter for Minnesota, things like that. Since California is so big and is where Sierra Club started, we actually have 13 chapters in the state of California to cover the various regions. So I work for the San Francisco Bay chapter, which includes the San Francisco, Alameda, Marin, and Contra Costa counties, along with the Redwood chapter, which is like North Bay along the coast up to the Oregon border. And for that area, I mostly just work out of for Napa, Solano, and Sonoma counties. And then the Motherlode chapter, which is like east of the Bay, including the Delta, includes Sacramento and goes north to the Oregon border on the eastern side and to the Nevada border. Is there another state that it would border? I don't think so. And for Motherlode chapter, I mostly just work for the Stockton area. And I'll get a little bit more into my work areas in a bit. I just wanted to do a little more grounding on Sierra Club first. So yeah, for today I'm mostly going to be talking to you anyways about the San Francisco Bay chapter's work, since that's where we are, and we focus on, like I said, municipal level, city level projects, and regional level projects. And that includes all kinds of environmental and environmental justice issues, ranging from preserving open spaces, working on zero waste, electrification in vehicles and in buildings, clean energy, sea level rise, adaptation and resilience, and getting rid of fossil fuels and holding fossil fuel companies accountable. So I wanted to pause for a minute and get a sense of some of the environmental issues that each of you cares about. Maybe we could get like 4 or 5 people to share an environmental issue that's of particular importance to each of you. Feel free to just jump in.
And use the chat function if you would rather do that rather than speak.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
So is there an environmental issue that you are particularly concerned about? Margaret.
Oh, Margaret and then Mary.
The development of the blockchain and how that is going to be using up a lot of energy. Is that included in your program?
You know, that's a really interesting issue that you're bringing up because, yeah, like it builds up these big server farms that require a lot of energy to keep cool and everything like that. Um, you know, that's not an issue locally because I don't think we house that many server farms in the Bay Area. I think that tends to be in less densely populated areas. I don't know if there's a part of Sierra Club that does focus on that. That's a really interesting question. Yeah. Mary.
I'm interested a lot in two areas of sustainability. One is in open spaces, but the other is in the ocean. I'm a big supporter of ocean.
Yes, you have some over there.
That's awesome. Thank you. And then anybody else want to share? Yeah, Joanne.
Yeah, I'm interested in the development of jobs as a result of changes in the environment and climate change.
Yes, absolutely. I'm definitely concerned with that as well. And then Judy, I'm seeing you put in the chat fossil fuel and plastic disposal. Yeah, definitely a concern. Well, thank you for all of that. These are definitely, except for the blockchain one, which I don't know as much about, these are all things that come up very often and are definitely of concern for me as well. I will specifically be talking a little bit about development of jobs and some fossil fuel stuff later. But as I get into, I'll also talk about how the ways that any issue that you have, there's probably a space within Sierra Club to lift that up. So a little bit about my work and my interests. I got into this work because of a particular interest in social justice. That's really where I came from. And as I was thinking about how I wanted to, shift my work, I was really thinking about how, climate disaster is already happening and it's imminent, like more is coming, and it's going to affect all of us, but it's already affecting people so strongly. There are people who have been historically marginalized, historically oppressed, Black people, brown people, poor people. They're already facing environmental crisis. Their health is already suffering. People are already dying from climate change. And so that's one of the reasons that's one of the issues that really drives me in this. So my work as the regional coal organizer, the broad mandate is to try to get coal out of the Bay Area and Delta regions. We don't necessarily think of coal as a major California issue. And in fact, we don't have any coal mines in California or even coal-fired power plants. That's definitely more of a East Coast and Appalachian issue. But we do have export terminals in the Bay Area. There's one in Richmond and there's one in Stockton. And the storage and handling of coal releases a lot of coal dust, which contains particulate matter 2.5, which is like tiny, I think it's like particles that are less than 2.5 microns. And you might be familiar with this term from the fires and things like that, like infiltrates lungs and can cause respiratory illness, cardiac disease, asthma, birth defects, things like this. And it particularly impacts the people that are closest to these coal terminals and even along coal train routes. And those are typically Black people, brown people, poor people, disadvantaged people who are already often facing, worse health situations to begin with. So another part of this is trying to keep coal out of Oakland. There's been a threat for the past 6 or 7 years now of trying to build out the old Oakland Army base to become a coal terminal. And there's been major movement to resist that. So far it hasn't happened, which is great. We're still figuring out what's still going on there because the company that was trying to make that happen has gotten bankrupt. So it's not exactly a threat anymore, but other people are still trying to push it through. Early last year, we were able to pass an ordinance in the city of Richmond phasing out the storage and handling of coal and petroleum coke in 3 years. Petroleum coke is a byproduct of oil refining that similar to coal dust, or coal gives off dust and particulate matter 2.5 that is damaging. And that is currently in litigation now because those companies are trying to, still export coal, but we're trying to protect public health. And then Stockton, the Port of Stockton ships out a fair amount of coal, and there's a relationship between Stockton and Richmond that allows coal to be shipped out, but that is in a much earlier phase of its campaign. But my work has also shifted into some other areas. As a result of some of the conversations around phasing out coal, there was a growing concern about what happens to these workers and what happens to workers who have been, involved in energy production and fossil fuels. We need to get rid of fossil fuels and we need to move on from a carbon energy, but that is the backbone of livelihood for so many people. And we saw what happened with coal communities when coal mines were shut down, and communities were just devastated. And it won't look exactly the same here, especially since these are generally more populated areas. But in a place like Kern County, for example, there's so much dependence on oil extraction there. So we really need to be thinking about a just transition, which is, includes a big part of it is including workforce development for people who are going to lose their jobs. And people are losing their jobs anyways, because the economics of fossil fuels writ large is suffering. We already see that. So we need to start planning for the future. We need to figure out ways to pay for supplemental wage benefits, support healthcare, support pensions, job retraining and apprenticeships, moving stipends, things like this, and also opening up job opportunities in new fields. And some of that might be green energy, some of that might be in site remediation and remediating old wells and things like that. But also we do just need to expand our sense of like what kind of jobs we're going to create. Another part of just transitions is moving from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy. And so this also includes how to support the communities that have been most impacted by fossil fuel companies, and thinking about things like how to support the tax base that is going to be lost by shutting down a refinery, for instance. Thinking about site remediation so that that can become usable public lands again and no longer toxic. Things like that. Some other issues that I work on have to do with air quality, environmental justice, refinery accountability, making sure that they're living up to the regulations that have been set in place, and pushing for stronger regulations that actually support the health of people living on the frontline communities. So that's just a sort of brief look at some of my work. For Sierra Club, for the chapter, we have a staff of about 7 people right now, I want to say. And it really is a volunteer-led and volunteer-driven organization. Most of the campaigns and most of our positions are developed by our volunteer leaders, and it's really grassroots focused in that way. We have really robust processes for electing our leaders and robust processes for choosing our positions, but it really allows for our volunteer leaders to choose their prerogative, raise up whatever passions they have, and make sure that that is getting centered and pushed as one of the chapter's focuses. So we're very volunteer driven, and we definitely have a lot of retired people and older populations who are our most dedicated volunteers, often because they have more time on their hands, so they're able to dedicate more time. So they really set our policy and agenda, and there's a lot of different ways that volunteering can show up. Some people, will come to the office and like staff the front desk for a while, make phone calls, write letters, things like that. Of course, we haven't been doing that right now because of COVID. But I think once we open up our office again, we're going to be looking at volunteer positions like that again. And then we also have the leaders who are on our executive committees and really carry the work forward. So there's sort of 3 main structures that allow for volunteer action. We have our regional groups. And so these are groups that focus on the issues within their particular region and in their particular cities. So that's San Francisco, Marin, Northern Alameda County, Southern Alameda County, West Contra Costa, Mount Diablo, Tri-Valley, and the Delta Group. And those are all run by their own executive committees, which are elected, and they meet monthly. But anybody who lives in those areas can go to those meetings. And if you are a member, I believe, who's been to 3 meetings, then you get voting power, something like that. And so these are the groups that they develop our positions. They will often write position letters into response to different projects. They will submit public comments to various agencies or city councils or things like that in support of one of the issues that they're working on. So then we have our issue committees. And these operate similar to the regional groups in that they have like a chair and they have like a committee style involvement, although they don't have elections to the same degree. But rather than focusing on a region, they focus on a particular issue area that can impact our residents across regions. So some examples of that are our Zero Waste Committee, the East Bay Public Lands Committee, the Energy Committee, and things like that. They also meet monthly and they're also open to everybody. So those are like really, really powerful groups, but they also can definitely take a lot of, they can be a big commitment. It can take up a lot of time. It can be pretty intensive in that way. And like, we really, really celebrate the people who are able to take that on and also understand that that's not everybody. If that was me, I don't know if that's how I would want to, use my time in the same way. So we have recently been developing what we call a advocacy team, which began this year. And this is a way that people and volunteers can step in for a little easier participation. And it's more action focused. It's really about, taking action on particular issues. We meet every month on the 4th Wednesday at 5:30 for just an hour. The other committees and groups can sometimes go on for like hours and hours as they like really delve into issues. We keep it tight at 1 hour. We offer people a chance to connect and meet each other, learn about the Sierra Club and a campaign that we're working on, and we give people the tools to take an action. So some examples of actions we've done are sending letters to the Air District to instate stricter rules on what are called cat crackers, fluidized catalytic cracking units, which are a way, they're a necessary component of crude oil refining so that it can then be refined further, but they give off tons of emissions that are really like toxic and dangerous. So we are supporting efforts to institute a rule for what are called wet gas scrubbers that would really, really decrease the level of emissions and be really important for both climate change and local community health. We've petitioned the governor to support electrification on a state level. Currently, it's been this city by city campaign to, call for electrification in the building of new buildings. And this is trying to, supersede that by making it a state level mandate and just sort of make it easier on these organizing efforts and other actions as well, things around like potentially phone banking. We have one coming up where we are hoping to write some more letters and get people to show up for public comments at a hearing at the Air District, things like that. So this is really a way to build advocates and build activists through action and learning. We want to give people the tools to, do the action with us, but then develop them as leaders, develop them as activists so that they can feel more comfortable taking action on their own and passing on those skills. That to me is really what organizing is. It's not just, all right, now we're doing this thing. It's like, I've taught you how to do something. Now you go educate somebody else. Like build out action in community with others. And so the advocacy team for me is a really important way of making that happen. So yeah, all of these are open, all of these options are open to you. I recommend the advocacy team since it's like a lighter step in and it's a little more relationship oriented and you'll get to hang out with me more often. But anything that appeals is really wide open. So yeah. Any questions for me? Let's chat.
Okay, so that was a really, really good overview, and it certainly should give people a sense of how they can get involved. So let's see if anybody has any questions or comments or other thoughts. And remember that I don't think I said this, but Joanne will be, before we leave, she will be summarizing what Jacob said and capturing any questions so that you can add to anything she's going to take back to the May 14th meeting to be sure that she captured the highlights. So, okay, questions or comments or thoughts? Bill.
Jacob, I assume that all you described about the jobs training or retraining work that is needed would be addressed in some way by President Biden's Build Back Better and Jobs plan. Is that right?
You know, it's interesting. There's a lot of different. There's not a lot of models of just transition currently. So we're sort of actively figuring it out now. Colorado is the first state to have really moved forward on instituting just transitions. About a couple of years ago, they put together the Just Transition Act, which brought together labor leaders and environmental justice leaders to set up a Just Transitions office and really start addressing these issues. It definitely seems like there's going to be some more support from the federal level on this. However, for me, my particular belief or principle is I am like just really big on like the local and the regional effort. I think that is where we have like the most power, and we need to make sure that we are really like clued into what's happening locally. The federal stuff is really important and can support that, but we can't do a one size fits all. We have to get nitty and gritty with it. So I would like to see, which Congressman DeSaulnier has put forward, getting funding for local and regional programs so that we can really see, so that the issues can be really addressed like in that really like fine-tuned way. There's been some moves on the state level to start setting that up, and folks that I work with at other organizations and within my own, we've all been talking about like Richmond is working towards a just transition model. We've talked about Contra Costa County, potential like regional models as part of their climate action plan and their general plan, and also looking at a statewide just transition model as was modeled by Colorado. So that maybe didn't really answer your question, but that's sort of the structures that we're looking at.
Okay,
thank you.
There's a question in the chat room. How are Sierra Club's values enforced in all of these regional actions? It's an interesting question. How do you assure all the local efforts mesh with overall Sierra Club objectives? And of course, that would be even more important if funding comes in for even more local and regional efforts.
Right, that is a great question that really gets into sort of some of the wonky bureaucratic nature of Sierra Club, which like it can be a very bureaucratic organization. We have what's called a one club, one voice policy. So national, sometimes if national adopts a policy, it's sort of overarching. I guess you could think of it like a federal governance system. But there's sort of this push and pull between like nationally set priorities and the understanding that local priorities will be different. And like there's sort of this like what do you call that? Feedback loop that happens around that, where we collaborate on some things. Like we get a lot of our support on some of our administrative things, a lot of legal support, and some other like organizing support from national. And there's more and more a push to really let, chapters really focus on their priorities and supporting them. But there are times when local priorities or local values get a little twisted. And so national can help support that to get sort of back in line with really centering, visionary paths forward.
I think so. Okay, Joanne had her hand up.
Okay, I wanted to ask, you wrote an article, which is where I found your name, and you mentioned that in Sacramento that there is a committee that's working, I think, it sounded like, maybe I read it wrong, reporting to the governor on job transition. So what is the Sierra Club, what's the involvement of the Sierra Club in this committee that's supposedly going to give a report toward the end of spring or the summer?
Great question. So for a little more context for everybody, last year in one of the governor's executive orders, he issued an order to the Office of Planning and Research to develop a roadmap for statewide just transitions. And so the Office of Planning and Research has been working on that. And when that came out, we several organizations got together, including Sierra Club, and we wanted to make sure that public participation was centered in that roadmap process. We weren't sure if they were going to be creating a roadmap for how to have that conversation or exactly what just transition policy should look like. And we're still waiting to find that out. But regardless, we are pushing for a really robust public participation process that centers the people who have been impacted by fossil fuels the most. And that includes frontline communities and labor who gets their employment from there. So Sierra Club was one of the organizations that spearheaded a letter to the Office of Planning and Research with those concerns. And we are still waiting to hear back. The roadmap is supposed to come out in July potentially. And later in May, it's not quite May yet, they will be hosting some workshops or webinars about the roadmap and the process. We still don't know exactly what those are going to be like, but we are, Sierra Club and other organizations are planning on showing up for that to either raise questions or just like get more information. So we're sort of just in a holding pattern. Part of our strategy around that was rather than waiting for this roadmap to come out and responding to that, we wanted to make sure to get our voice in early so that they knew that we were interested in watching this and so that they couldn't say that we hadn't been involved from the get. And so when it comes out, we are definitely planning on responding to it and celebrating what we think is really good and offering ideas for that we think would be better, I guess.
So, Jacob, you mentioned a number of ways in which people could get involved with either local or regional or policy issues. How do you make that into a reality? Are there contacts that you can give us? You can either give it to us now or chat it in or send it to me later and we'll get it out to everybody. But, how do we operationalize these good opportunities that you've mentioned?
Great question, and I love that. So one avenue that is always available to you, email me or give me a call and I can give you my information and I can set you up with the person that I think you should talk to or send you to the right meeting. Want to be clear that is always available to you. I do have a link to the RSVP page for the next advocacy team meeting. So that has the information about when it will be and how to sign up for it. And I will drop that in the chat right now. But I can also email that on later. And then for any of the regional groups or issue committees, my recommendation would be just to go to our website and poke around and figure out which one you like best. And there's usually an email attached to that you can reach out to. But again, I can always send a connecting email.
That would be good. And we will be sending out a follow-up email to all of you, everybody who's here, and even those who registered and didn't actually come today. And we will have any resources that Jacob either gives us or chats in now. So don't worry about copying that very long link you just saw. We will send it all to you. So that's good. Okay, more questions or comments or Bill has another one. Yes.
This is a mundane question, Jacob. I got a package in the mail recently from the Sierra Club and the return address is Oakland, 2101 Webster Street. Is that your office and is this a local or is this a national request for membership?
So that address you mentioned is the national office.
Okay.
The membership system works such that you become a national member and you also automatically become a local member as well. So it's dependent upon your address. You become a member to all of Sierra Club, and then you are identified as like whichever region you are in.
Okay.
But the SF Bay chapter's office was at the Ecology Center, which was on San Pablo in Berkeley, if you're familiar. We actually gave that office up at the end of last year. Our lease was up anyways, and because of the pandemic, we weren't really sure when we were going to be going back. So we decided to let that office go. So we are starting to look at the possibility of going back to an office now. But that wouldn't be until July or later. But we don't know where that will be yet. So the local office does not currently exist, which is interesting.
So many impacts of the pandemic that you don't even think about.
Yeah, I mean, we're sort of saving money that way is part of it. That was part of the reasoning. But yeah, it was, there was definitely, I think, some sadness from some long-term volunteers and folks who've been around, because it was a nice space. There was lots of meetings and organizing there and things like that. But yeah, didn't really make sense to hold on to it.
Right. Okay, other questions or comments or thoughts? I'm wondering if anybody has a sense of an issue committee that they would like to get involved with, or not that this would be a commitment, but just a feeling, or are you gonna leave the meeting and then go do something? Judy, I see you shaking your head.
I think Betty came off of mute.
Oh, she's on mute. Can you unmute yourself, Judy? Okay.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. I am shaking my head. I mean, I do really want to start getting involved with something, and the advocacy team sounds like a very appropriate one to get my foot in the door. And I, like everybody else here, we're all listening to a lot of different organizations right now, trying to decide what feels best, where do we put our time. So I'm still kind of waiting for the last summary meeting that we have. So, but I definitely am going to get involved. So.
Yes, and I think what we found out, after the first meeting, which is part of the reason we organized these Friday talks, is that there were a lot of people who were new, people who like me and other people who definitely want to do something about climate change, but have not been involved and don't really know where to put your toe in the water. And that was when Bill and Rochelle Lefkowitz organized this effort. That was the purpose of it, to kind of introduce people to what was going on locally and help them, sort of get into their bathing suits and get their toes closer to the water. So this has been really helpful. And that's part of the reason why we are sending out the links and encouraging people. And we also recognize that maybe people aren't even ready yet, which is why we are having the meeting on the 14th. We will talk not only about what action people might have been motivated to take after hearing one of these organizations. I sort of cheated during one of them and clicked on the link and signed up so I could say something on the 14th that I actually did do something. But, also to kind of try to identify what barriers there are, especially during the pandemic when people are still reluctant to go out, and organizations maybe don't even, as you said, have an office, or, aren't having meetings, and people are kind of zoomed out. So, we hope that you'll come on the 14th and surface some of these barriers that might be there, so we can start talking about how to address them. And, we know people want to get involved. You've all hung in there. It's been, 2 months practically, and you've been faithfully showing up and listening. And as Judy said, sampling and hearing, and maybe not making up, no commitment yet, but it's going to be interesting on the 14th to see what the feedback is about what people have done and maybe why they haven't done anything. So, okay.
Well, so I'll also say that, like, as much as I would love for anybody to get involved with Sierra Club, like, do whatever speaks best to you, because we all approach things differently, but also a lot of these organizations work together very frequently. So if you're working with one organization, you're often also supporting the efforts of another organization in some way. Like we definitely, we partner all the time. And a couple other things for the advocacy team and all the other groups, we are meeting virtually still. And for the barriers, I would love to hear barriers that come up. That is a really important learning moment for me, and I'm always trying to learn more ways to make things accessible to people. So if there's any sort of feedback that people come up with, please let me know, because that like really helps me and helps my job and helps the organization. Betty, I had seen yourself taking, I had seen that you had taken yourself off mute, I think. Was there something that you had wanted to say, Betty?
Betty, do you want to have a comment? Oops, you're muted.
Now you're muted.
Okay. You mentioned the Contra Costa County project, and I would be interested in knowing more about that. So I guess would the way be to come to an advocacy team meeting, or how would I go about finding out about Contra Costa project?
Well, so it would depend on which projects, because, but I guess I would say you and I should probably have a conversation offline, and then I can figure out where to point you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Betty. Bill, yeah.
I don't know about the rest of you, but I get an enormous number of emails every day in my inbox, and many of them are from climate action organizations. And
Yeah.
it's kind of overwhelming, because if you make a donation once, you keep getting
More.
and more emails, and it's hard to know how to jump in. So having a talk like this, Jacob, by you, is so helpful. And I love your options that you described, the regional groups, the issues committees, and the advocacy teams. And for myself, I think it was like Judy, I would probably want to start with the advocacy teams, because it's sort of an easier way to get my my foot in the door. So thank you very much, just personally. And it's, you know, it's sort of a counter. This is a counter to the overwhelming email inbox that I have every day.
Plus, putting a face on it helps too.
Putting a face on it. Yeah, it's great.
I mean, like, we have to do, in some ways, like all these organizations has to do, you know, that like big push, because you just got to get as much sign on as you possibly can. But like really good advocacy and really good action comes from like personal touch. It comes from like relationships and like working through it together. That's like where power is built. So
now we have a connection with you. So that's great.
Yeah.
And we will not let go, so you'll be sorry. Okay, so this is what we want to do. We want Joanne to kind of tell us some of the key points that she heard that she's going to take back to the meeting on the 14th. And she's telling you this so you can add anything that she might have missed that you think was important. And Jacob also can add anything that either he missed or that, you know, we all didn't get. So we want people to get a flavor on the 14th for what we heard today, and hopefully get a sense of how they can get their feet wet. So Joanne, this is just the first round. You're just kind of making a few points here that you want people to build on.
Okay, first of all, let me say to you that thank God I learned shorthand years ago, because there's a lot to swallow. I think I'm going to call you personally at some point just to hone in, so that when I give the report the next time, I'll have a little more detail. But bear with me. I'm just going to go through a sketch.
I also wrote up some notes for myself to follow, so I could also send that over to you.
Okay, all right.
Good idea.
Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to zero in on just basically a few things. I'm not going to highlight, but everyone knows about the Sierra Club. So what I'm going to just say is that it sounds like your focus is on energies, for example, fossil fuel, coal, air quality, refineries, electrification, energy, sea level rise, and fossil accountability are some of the listings that I
Well, this is one of those pregnant Zoom freezes that we always hope we won't get.
A strategic freeze.
Yes, particularly you hope you don't get it when you are running the meeting, which is always a dilemma, or if you're the speaker. So, okay, here's the deal. You guys will get notes from us. we'll get Joanne's notes or maybe Jacob's outline or whatever we get, along with the links that he's going to give us. And you will be able to, think about what you want to add, if anything. And maybe if she can't come back, we will, we'll help her. Oh, I see what she's gone out. So maybe she will be able to come back. And then she'll be able to add whatever thoughts that you have. And when she delivers the report on the 14th, it'll be a compendium of what you all said and what Jacob said. But I think, maybe Bill wants to add to this. It's really important for you to come on the 14th because, and I think, I have to expand on what Jacob said. If there are barriers to getting involved, and if the two villages are going to continue to work to help its members and get involved and take action, which is what presumably we want to do, we need to hear your voices so you can tell us what you've done, what turned you on, what motivated you, and what's getting in your way.
I
So
couldn't agree more with Julie. Actually, Julie and I have prepared an email. This message is going to go out to all of you and a whole slew of others in the next few days, I think, to let you know about this May 14th event. So please do come. I think it's going to be very interesting. We're going to have some video presentation that'll include Greta Thunberg and David Attenborough, among others. And it should be an inspiring and interesting review of what we've been able to accomplish and what barriers we still find in place. So here comes Joanne back.
Yes, she's back. So, and we did forget one more thing. We do have one more Friday talk, Judy, and for the rest of you who are still shopping, and it's the 1,000 grandmothers who are going to talk to us. And at one point, they thought they might be coming to us from the pipeline in South Dakota, or Montana, where they were going actually to be taking action. And we thought that would be very cool if they actually would be live streaming from there. You could see them in action, but I don't think they are coming, but I don't think they're coming from there. But that will be the last Friday talk. And then that will lead into the 14th. Now, Joanne, are you back?
I'm back. I don't know what happened, but anyway, I'm back.
Okay, so you want to go on with your summary?
I hope this helps. All right, so then you talked about the whole issue, which you seem to be following, which is the storage of coal. And you talked about the areas where there's an impact in the Stockton area, the Richmond area, and apparently it ties in with a lot of the issues around those who live close to these areas and the impact on them, and what you are doing and others are doing in terms of fixing that, in terms of job opportunities and so forth. Then you went on to, then we talked again a little bit about the focus of the Sierra Club, which I think is just a repetition. And then you talked about the advocacy groups, which I'm going to jump to, because there you talk about this is where volunteers can get involved, and you meet every fourth Monday for an hour, and this is where volunteers can learn about what the issues are. Are you hearing me?
Yeah, we meet on the fourth Wednesday, not the fourth Monday.
Yeah, okay, excuse me. Oh, the fourth Wednesday, I'm sorry, for 1 hour. Okay, and then you talk about there where you're talking about emissions, for example, emission issues, electrification. And this is when you talked about the whole idea that contacting the governor for these issues. And then I asked you about, and Bill asked you about job training, and you've got a lot about what's going on in job training. And then I asked you, then the governor's office, the planning and research that's going on, and roadmaps for job transition. So it kind of ended there in terms of, there's a lot that I can see that I need to flesh out in terms of the advocacy area. And I'd really like to be able to do that, because I think I know that it's an interest of mine, but that's selfish. But anyway, that's where that's where it's.
Okay, so does anybody want to add any highlight that they heard particularly that they didn't hear Joanne mention, that you want to be sure gets reported out on the 14th? Okay, so,
One thing I would like to add
oh yes,
is
you're
that
allowed
was
to do that.
that was great. And I also want to just sort of let you know that the issues that I talked about today are really just the ones that I'm working on and I know. And I am just like a small part. And there's like so much that I don't even like dip my toes into because I just do not have the time. There's just like there's so much going on that there's usually a place for like all the interest to come up. So I kind of keep my head in the sand sometimes so that I don't get overwhelmed by everything that we're working on.
Well, and you also mentioned a couple of times that there is the space and policy for people to raise up issues maybe that aren't being worked on either, nationally or locally or regionally. So,
Exactly.
that's a good thing to keep in mind too.
Mhm.
So, okay, so I've solved the mystery of who Tristan Weir is. And that is actually Susan Pierpoint, who's from Ashby Village, and her son-in-law set up her computer, and that's his name.
Oh.
It's not a mysterious Zoom bomber. Okay, so anything else that anybody wants to add, Bill?
Yeah, I want to thank you, Joanne, for taking the notes today. And I just want to say that the notes that were prepared for other sessions, like the ones prepared by Bruce Johnson and Mary Lanier, were fantastic. And not only are they going to be valuable for the review of what these groups have done on these 5 Friday morning climate talks, they're also really useful for all of us. And we sent out Bruce's notes to everybody who attended. Which one was that, Bruce? Was that Active Allies?
Yes, it was Active Allies.
Active Allies. And Mary, which one did you do? Was it Elders?
Elders climate, yeah.
Elders Climate Action. They were great and really useful for all of us. So we'll send out these notes, as Mary said, as Julie said today. And I just want to thank everybody who's been taking these notes because they're really great.
Well, good. You're just scaring Joanne. She'll probably run away from home.
I'm going to run very far.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Okay, well, you'll shuffle away from home. Anyway, yeah, so I think that's a good point. And the other thing is, don't forget this is being recorded. And so there were a number of people who wanted to come and had a class on Friday or another commitment. And so, if you know somebody who wants to hear about the Sierra Club and their local activities, the link will be up probably before we say goodbye to you, I think. Right, Craig? It gets put up pretty fast. So, yeah. Right. Okay, I think we're finished unless somebody has a last minute thing to add or comment on or say. We're always glad to see your faces, and we'll see you hopefully next
Friday.
Next Friday. Okay. So Bill, Linda Lewin is signing on, and she's from San Francisco just as we're signing off.
Well, I'll talk with Linda.
Okay.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you, everybody. It was really nice to talk to all of you.
Bye.
Excellent. Really good.
Hope to see some of you in the future. Bye.